Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 654 for the 25th of April, 2021. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. And today, the 25th of April, is known as Anzac Day here in Australia, and I guess in New Zealand, and it's our Memorial Day. It's the day for the veterans. Coming up on this week's show, we have an interview with Mick West. Mick West from Metabunk, who has been investigating the latest and greatest UFO sighting, well, a video that was produced a couple of years ago and has been and I'm using air quotes, leaked to the world of some mysterious flying pyramids at night over a naval ship in the Pacific. What a mystery! Anyway, at the top of the show, we have Mick West to tell us all about this latest UFO. Oh, there's a term you don't hear much anymore, UFO. Following that, it's the newsletter from Australian Skeptics. See what's caught the skeptical eye of skeptical Tim Mendham this week. Following that, on a far more serious note, I talked to my friend Abhijit Chanda from New Delhi, India, about the latest situation with COVID-19 in that country, and it's grim. It's not a good situation at all. And Abhijit will tell us about some of the claims of various alternative cures in India. Then to round off the show, we dive once more into the Trove archives. This week we're going to be looking at references in the Australian press over the decades to poltergeist. Poltergeist and UFOs, a bit of an old-fashioned Skeptic Zone episode this week. But now it's time for me to not run downstairs. It's time for me to finish this show off and prepare to be Uncle Richard at the birthday party of my niece who turned 7. A room full of 7-year-olds who want me to do magic tricks and origami. I think that sounds like a lot of fun. Who knows, there might be marshmallows. Marshmallows, that's always good. Marshmallows, ice cream, and bubbly water, like lemonade. Well, I think about all that. I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Joining me now on the line all the way from Sacramento in California is the author Mick West. Hello, Mick.
Hello, Richard. Good to be on again.
Yeah, it's been a while since you've been on the Skeptic Zone, and I say the author, of course, I have here right in my hand, Escaping the Rabbit Hole, a guide to helping friends, family, and loved ones how to debunk conspiracy theories using facts, logic, and respect. Now, that book came out, 2 years ago, something like that?
Yeah, it was over 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, yeah, so quite a while ago, kind of before all the stuff went down with the storming of the Capitol and whatnot, so...
right, yeah.
Yeah, there's elements of it that probably could be updated a little bit, but I think a lot of it is still pretty relevant. Interestingly, there's not much about UFOs in the book.
Oh, right, because it talks about 9/11 and the chemtrails, contrails, all that sort of stuff, but no, not much about UFOs, huh?
Yeah, I wasn't really into UFOs so much back then. I think I kind of got more and more interested in the last few years as a bunch of cases came up that I got interested in analysing the video of.
Right.
But back then, no, it was almost like a fringe topic for me back then, but now it's very interesting.
Who knows? Maybe there's a resurgence in UFOs, because the reason I've contacted you is, last week, the week before, the video came to my attention of these so-called pyramid UFOs filmed by a sailor, someone in the Navy, and it's sort of gone a bit viral of lots of news agencies saying Pentagon confirms UFO, it's leaked, here it is. And I had a look at it, and my very first thought of looking at this video, and I'll link to this in the show notes, was, oh, it's out of focus. But I didn't really have time to do much more investigation until I saw your video, again, which will be linked to on the show notes, which clearly shows what's really going on. But just for those viewers who haven't seen this whole affair, if you could give us an overview, that would be great.
Yeah, the video is shot in night vision, so it looks green, that kind of typical green you see in the movies when soldiers are using the night vision goggles. And night vision is just image amplification, so it's just making things brighter. It's not really the kind of infrared type thermal camera. It's just light. They use infrared light as well. So this sailor apparently is looking through his night vision monocular. And it starts out, you can see he's looking at some stars in the distance, and then he pans the camera around, and you see this little flashing light appear. And he kind of zooms in on this flashing light, and you can see that it looks like it's triangular shape, and you see it continue to flash, and then it just kind of moves along a bit as he tries to zoom in, and it moves off the screen. And this was presented as being a pyramid-shaped UFO. Not just a triangular one, but an actual pyramid shaped, as if people could discern some kind of pyramid shape from this. But there's a couple of interesting things to notice when you look at the video, and one of the first things you notice is that it's flashing, and the rate at which it's flashing and the pattern with which it's flashing is very, very reminiscent of a plane. And I kind of looked into timing the flashes and seeing how long it was between each flash, and it seems like the two overlapping patterns, which kind of match a 737, a very common airplane, and the type of airplane that would have been in the air at that time, because we actually have a location of the ship that they claim that they were on, that the video was from, and that was actually right underneath the incoming path of air traffic going to Los Angeles area airports, to Long Beach and to LAX. So there would have been planes in the sky overhead, and if he had his night vision goggles and looked up in the sky at that time, he would have seen them. So it makes perfect sense that it would be a plane.
Absolutely, yeah. And when you look at it again with that in mind, and you see the flashing, you say, well, that's what planes do. But why is it then that the video that's been released and people have gone crazy over, why are they shaped like pyramids or giant triangles in the sky?
Well, it looks to me like it's a thing called bokeh, which is a Japanese word, and it basically means the quality of the outer focus parts of an image. And when you look at a point light source, such as a star, for example, or a light on a plane that's very far away, the bokeh turns into the shape of whatever the aperture of the camera is. Now, lots of cameras will have hexagonal apertures, so you'll see these hexagonal bokehs or octagonal or noctagonal.
Right.
But sometimes people will do things like they will cut out little heart shapes and put it on the front of the camera just to create a different shape. And some cameras actually have a triangular aperture. The aperture is inside the lens, and it's what basically constricts the amount of light that gets through to the back, and you can have it wide open to have more light, and you can have it smaller to have less light, which gives you better focus if there's enough light. So if they had the aperture within the camera just a little bit closed, it would have formed a triangle inside the camera. And then this would, and if the camera was then a little bit out of focus, that would mean any point light in that source would show up as a triangle. And then we noticed that not only is this flashing light a triangle, but there's two other lights that it passes towards the end of the video. And those lights are not actually moving. And those lights are actually stars. And they form the exact same triangle shape that the plane forms.
Yeah, and what's marvelous about the video that you produced and is up on YouTube is that it takes each of these points of interest very carefully and examines them and shows you exactly how the aperture is working, why it looks like a triangle, points it up to the sky, you get exactly the same effect. And it's one of the rare cases where the explanation is so, in my mind, so convincing and so obvious and so easy to understand. But let me play you now a short clip of what sort of got my attention about this video more than anything else was Jeremy Corbell came on Australian television and said the following.
This is a truly global story. What separates this footage compared to other UFO footage you might see is that the U.S. Navy photographed and filmed these pyramid-shaped UFOs and transmedium vehicles. And as a journalist, I obtained and released some of this historic footage with my mentor in journalism, George Knapp. And this has now, as you said, been directly confirmed by the Pentagon. So that is significant in and of itself, how quickly they confirmed that these reports are contained within their educational briefings for individuals in the military.
So that was Jeremy Corbell on Australian TV. And I mean, if you were to listen to what he's saying, it's almost like he's the one bringing this secret information to the world. But I think you know Jeremy.
Yeah, I've kind of tangled with Jeremy a few times because he has very what I would characterize as optimistic views when it comes to these various UFO videos that I've been investigating over the last few years, specifically the ones from the US Navy, which now includes this one. There were 3 other ones that came out a couple of years ago, and I analyzed those in depth and kind of figured out what they were, but Jeremy kind of disagrees with me quite vehemently and tries to get experts on his show to explain why I'm wrong. But I keep kind of pushing back on that, because I don't think I'm wrong. But when it comes to this one, he's thinking that because he's got something that's an official video, then it's now an official UFO video. He can release it, and this proves UFOs exist, and it's this amazing thing. And it's a flying triangle, it's a flying pyramid, when we don't have anything that looks like a flying pyramid. So that in itself is amazing. But of course, there's 2 things there. He didn't realize that it's not actually a flying pyramid. It's actually almost certainly a plane at around 30 to 35,000 feet, just simply flying towards LAX. And he's really mischaracterizing what it means to be official. It's been confirmed that it's an official video, which only means that it was taken by a sailor on a Navy vessel. And that's really all that it means. They do say it is included in the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenons Task Force, I think, consideration. But it doesn't mean that it's actually unidentified, because what the task force looks at is phenomena that were unidentified at the time. Right. So what they want to do is look at examples of things where a sailor, for example, misidentified something originally and try to figure out what went wrong. What is the procedural mix-up that caused this to happen? And if you look at this video, it's really not a very professional video. You could figure out the actual resolution of it by looking at some of the pixels within the image, because it's been scaled up. And it's really, really small. It's something like 160 pixels high, which is minute size of video. And it's been scaled up and it's all blurry, which is why you can't really see very much detail when the things first arrive. You can't even tell the triangles when they first come in. And it's really not a very good video. And he's still presented it as being the best UFO video ever. And he said this a number of times, and it's been quoted as saying that, which is, it's quite funny, really, that he would say that. I mean, it would be great for him and for everyone if we had an amazing UFO video of something new and amazing. But this unfortunately is not it.
Well, from his point of view, I guess he gets notoriety. He gets to go on Australian television. Must feel great to have media from the world contacting him. He's very important for a very short amount of time. But I kind of figure after seeing your video, which, very, very painstakingly takes it apart, and you can clearly see what's going on, I'm tempted to think he's going to have egg on his face and come out and say, "Oh, well, I was clearly wrong." But honestly, I don't expect that to happen. Yeah,
well, it's kind of he kind of moves on very quickly to the next thing. There was a case before with a UFO where the UFO looked like it was surrounded by a glow, and he was saying on the Joe Rogan Experience, this podcast, that this glow was a cold glow that indicated some kind of negative energy field or something, some kind of exotic propulsion thing. And then I quite convincingly explained that it wasn't. And then a year later, he's back on the Joe Rogan podcast, and Joe asks him about this thing, and he says, "Oh no, it's just an artifact of the camera." So he's not a person who's completely immune to reason. He will see things for what they are eventually, and I think that's what's going to happen here. He will realize that it is in fact just triangle bokeh, and it is almost certainly a plane, and he'll just refocus on the other things that he has and the fact that this was some kind of official release that they got, and he'll just move on.
I'll be interested to see if, for example, the Sunrise program from which the clip I played, I've actually written to them and sent them a link to your video and said, look, it's great fun to have a UFO guy on and a really scary, interesting, spooky story or mysterious or whatever it is. But now it's obvious what it is. Maybe you should tell your audience, have another segment. We'll see if that happens at all. But just going through the comments under the video on YouTube, the Sunrise video, for example, there are at the time of recording 3,529 comments. And there are some, I would say, skeptical people in there. There's some making fun of it, but there are an awful lot of people siding with the fact that, yeah, see, I told you UFOs are coming. We've known it for years. This is clear. The Pentagon have admitted it, which is another thing about this whole story. I mean, the focus is, the framing of, I should say, is that this is an official admission by the US government that UFOs, and for UFOs, that means in their world, it means spaceships from another planet, are real. And that's going to be very difficult to overcome, because I don't think too much of the media will be very interested in showing the takedown of this.
No, I kind of agree with you. And part of the problem is that the explanation is actually more complicated seeming and more difficult to understand than just the simple idea that it's aliens flying in a pyramid.
Yeah.
Even though one thing is quite ridiculous.
Yeah, you say that, but honestly, after watching your video, I think you do an excellent job in explaining something which is, it's not exactly rocket science, but after watching your video, it's just so clear and obvious, and you say, oh, that's how it works. So that's what I really appreciated about the work you put into that.
Thank you. I did make an effort to make it accessible, but you know what the media is like. They like their sound bites, and if it takes a few minutes to explain something, there's not very many media outlets, especially when we're talking about breakfast TV, would actually get into the nitty gritty of it and talk about what is bokeh and what is a flashing pattern and what are these stars, what is night vision. There's several aspects to it. Even the fact that the nature of the filming of the video was probably done with someone holding up an iPhone to the back of a night vision binocular. These are those like little details which are all important to discuss. But unfortunately, the media likes to just have a "whoa, alien" story rather than let's explain how cameras work story.
I agree. I think so. That's why I will be. I'm hopeful, but I will be surprised if this TV show, for example, or others decide to follow up and tell their audience, that story we had the other week about the UFOs buzzing the naval ship. Well, it turns out. So, folks, yes, look, please have a look at the video. I will post the links in this week's show notes. It's a wonderful video from a scientific point of view, and it's not a debunking video. I mean, this is a very strange term in the skeptical world. Some people love it, some people hate it, but I prefer to think of it as an investigation into what was going on, rather than the cartoon idea people have as skeptics is that we set out to, from the beginning, to debunk. You didn't do that. You just set out to find out what was going on.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't know what this light actually was. I mean, it was possible that it could have been a drone. It was possible it could have been some kind of flying triangle, like a kite or a balloon that's shaped like a triangle or something like that. And it's even possible that it might have been none of the above, and that it could perhaps only be an alien spaceship. But we've got to look at the other explanations before we make the jump to aliens. And once you look at the possibility that it might be a high-flying plane and the camera a bit out of focus, everything just falls into place and everything matches. So that's almost certainly what it is.
Or maybe it is an alien spaceship disguised as a pyramid and trying to mimic the flashing pattern of a 737.
Yes, that's always a possibility, which you can never entirely discount. But we could all be living in a dream, or we could all be aliens in disguise and not realize it.
I think some of us are, quite frankly. Now, Mick, where can people find out more about your investigations and, of course, your interesting podcast about, escaping the rabbit hole?
Oh, that's a bunch of things. I've got my Twitter feed where I do most of my initial on-the-minute UFO debunking. My website, metabunk.org, has the more detailed look at things. And then my podcast is Tales from the Rabbit Hole, which you can find wherever good podcasts are given away for free. And that's about it.
Excellent. Well, Mick, again, congratulations on a very concise, short, and informative video. It leaves us in no doubt what was really going on. And I look forward to catching up with you again soon, maybe when the next UFO buzzes us.
Yes, and I'm sure there will be a next UFO.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be. But for now, Mick West, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Mick West. In my podcast, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, I have extended conversations with people who have been involved in conspiracy culture. I do this for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it's really interesting. These people have great stories about how they fell down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, what they did down there, and what it was that helped them out. Sometimes I also talk to people who investigate conspiracy theories, and they have equally fascinating stories from the other side. Secondly, I want to understand how best to prevent the spread of conspiracy theories and misinformation, which is an increasing problem in a time when alternative media is exploding. The best way to do this is to communicate effectively with the people involved, and the best way to do that is with a nice long chat. So check it out, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, tftrh.com.
Let's take a look at the Australian Skeptics newsletter number 121. Hi all, it says. As the stop, start, hesitation, gung-ho, try again, rollout of COVID vaccines continues, the alt, med and quack cure brigade willing and ready to enter the breach. Not good. Thank heavens for Prince Philip for some comedy relief, even post-mortem. And don't forget it's flu season, and even though COVID is top of mind, it is still an issue. April the 26th to the 30th is Influenza Action Week with free flu shots on April 30th in Sydney, Melbourne and Perth town halls. And in fact, since I've read that, I've booked myself a flu shot here in Sydney. Now let's see what Tim Mendham has sent us this week. Desperate families pray to snake oil treatments for autism, and pray is spelled P-R-E-Y. A parliamentary inquiry into autism has heard submissions about how debunked treatments are being peddled as cures for autism. And that's certainly nothing new, sadly. Cook Island's Epsom salt cure referred to coroner. Promotion of shonky cures, i.e. Epsom salt solutions, is causing problems in the Cook Islands. Media's hypocrisy undermines critical thinking. Mainstream news outlets have gone after COVID-19 conspiracy theorists with a passion. But when it comes to equally important science topics, they have no problem ignoring evidence and promoting conspiratorial nonsense. This blatant hypocrisy causes confusion and fuels the public's skepticism for science more broadly. That's an interesting article and fairly short, says Tim. And don't forget, each of these little news items I'm reading out is accompanied by a link so you can read the article in full. UK Health Authority promotes acupuncture for chronic pain. The UK's National Institute for Health and Care Excellence an executive non-departmental public body of the Department of Health in England, which publishes guidelines in health technologies and treatments, is recommending acupuncture as part of a regime for dealing with chronic pain. The justification for acupuncture's inclusion, you'll have to scroll down to section 1.2.5 and click on a link to see this, makes for interesting reading. Edzard Ernst, noted campaigner against pseudoscience in medicine, has republished this justification and called for comments. The rise of pseudoscientific Islamic cures in Iran. Mixing influential fundamentalist religious leaders and medicine can be fraught with problems, especially when it comes to offering alternative cures when established treatments are not available. In Iran, various cures for COVID include a cotton ball soaked in violet oil inserted into your anus or drinking hot camel wee. And watch out for those COVID vaccines that will turn you gay. An interesting article. Yeah. Another link here is for the interactive chart on biblical contradictions. Covers the Old and New Testaments. Very interactive, very large. Tim goes on to say that the March 2021 issue of The Skeptic, the journal from Australian skeptics, is out with a major feature on various mind control techniques and the pseudoscience behind them, with a link so you too can subscribe to the magazine. And another link to an excerpt from the magazine, which is all about the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project by Adrian Hill. You can also contact Tim Mendham if you have an idea for a story. We have a roundup of events coming over the next month or so, including Perth, Sydney, Canberra, Queensland, Victoria, Gold Coast and Adelaide. Items of interest here at the bottom of the page. World's 5 most haunted places. Mainly islands, including a Dole Island in Mexico, but honestly, including the whole of the Isle of Wight is a bit of a stretch. Prince Philip interests in aliens and UFOs. Now it can be told. Then again, the royals are into homeopathy, so why should we expect any different? And that was the Australian Skeptics newsletter. Newsletter 121. And you too can get that newsletter delivered to your inbox every other week. Just go to www.skeptics.com.au and sign up.
Hi, my name's Jo Thornley, and I'd like you to join I'd like you to listen to my podcast about cults called Zealot. It's available pretty much anywhere you find podcasts, with further reading on the Zealot Facebook page. Each episode, a guest joins me to talk about a specific cult, where we answer the big questions like, is there yoga in it? Is there yoga in it? And does anyone think they're Jesus? Does anyone think they're Jesus? Pop over to my compound and have a listen. I've just mixed up a fresh batch of Kool-Aid. Oh, Zealot.
And joining me now all the way from New Delhi in India, it's Abhijit Chanda. Hello, Abhijit.
Hello, Richard. How are you doing?
I'm not doing too bad. Australia is not doing too bad. I'm waiting for my vaccination shot, which should be hopefully next month or the month after. But I know, because we're hearing about it on the news quite a lot, India is not in the best situation. In fact, let me read to you a press report that's come here via news.com.au. India reaches world record of 315,000 daily COVID-19 cases as oxygen supplies runs out. This does not sound good, and the pictures we are seeing on the news reports in the evening are very distressing. And you're right in the middle of it. How's it looking from where you are?
Just as bad, probably worse. Yeah, so we've actually hit 332,000 in a
Wow.
in a day. We've hit just over 2.4 million active cases as of now, as of yesterday, actually. So, and the official report is that there have been 2,256 deaths in a day on the 22nd of April.
In a day.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
these are official numbers. So, like we spoke about last time,
Yeah.
the official numbers are, I wouldn't say conservative, they're just wrong. Because, for example, there was, they're less by orders of magnitude. So there's this reporter called Sanjeev Gupta from Bhopal in Madhya Pradesh, and that city reported 4 deaths on that day, on the particular day of the reporting. But he was at the crematorium, and there were dozens of funeral pyres which were burning in the crematorium, and several more in the queue to come up there. The crematoriums across the country have been flooded. They have been running day and night. And in Lucknow, which is in Uttar Pradesh, which is just east of where I am, there were 100 funeral pyres burning on the 14th of April. And that day, the whole state reported just 85 deaths. And this is just the capital city of the state, where there were 100 funeral pyres counted by a reporter, when the whole state had reported 85 deaths.
Yeah. So it's just, there's a problem with getting accurate reports, obviously.
Exactly. It is. And I have maybe, I'm trying not to think like a conspiracy theorist, but they're not helping.
Yeah.
Making it really hard for me to think more rationally about this. It's just, it's crazy. It's heartbreaking. And and we haven't even reached the peak. The peak has been predicted to be around mid-May, between the 10th and the 15th.
Wow.
So it's crazy. We've got multiple strains running around. We've got double, sometimes even triple mutations that have been reported, where you have 3 different strains which might have converged to form an even deadlier strain, which could even be avoiding all the antibodies that you had last time. So the chance of reinfection has gone up quite rapidly.
It's not a very good situation at all. It's a nightmare. And during the course of 2020, when we were discussing this situation in India, I guess the main thrust of our conversation was the utter lack of success when it comes to homeopathy, the homeopathic treatments, because that was sparked by a group here in Australia called Homeopathy Plus, which were posting all eyes to India. India will show us the way. Homeopathy, going on the great benefits of to the people of India using homeopathy. But I think you're telling me now, in our brief conversation before we started, that it's not so much homeopathy, but there's certainly lots of other quackery going on there.
Oh, yes, absolutely. One of them, of course, which is the most popular, I think, not just in India, but in other places, is remdesivir. And the more recent, more thorough studies about remdesivir shows that it has absolutely no effect on your risk of being hospitalized or even your risk of death. So, and it is so much so that it's gone into the black market, and a vial which cost maybe 1,800 rupees, but as stipulated by the government, is selling for 20,000 rupees.
Ooh.
So
Wow.
10 times more expensive for a medicine that doesn't work.
Wow. Well, that's we can make an analogy to homeopathy. Homeopathy is more expensive than liquid gold, I think, when you consider it's just or printer ink for home printers. That's quite expensive. But yes, the markup on just water and sugar from the homeopaths is criminal, to be blunt. It's quite outrageous. One of the things that's happening here now is Australia has now limited the number of flights quite a lot coming from India, and the daily reports just today say that there was a certain flight from New Delhi, I think it was, maybe Mumbai, that had 20 cases on it, or it's just a terrible situation, yeah. And
Yikes.
so, I mean, we don't know how it's going to play out exactly, but the bottom line is, of course, from what we're concerned with, is things like homeopathy and Ayurvedic is simply just no match for COVID whatsoever.
Absolutely none. And now, and like as if nobody's learned from the last year, there are new remedies which are making their rounds, especially on WhatsApp. One of them is inhaling a little pouch of camphor mixed with a few other aromatic Indian spices. One is called ajwain, and a few others which have been making their rounds, and people have gotten fanatical about it, except that camphor can be toxic if you inhale too much of it. I mean, of course, it's in things like Vicks VapoRub and stuff like that.
Right,
where, it evaporates easily. But people are taking lumps of camphor and holding it to their noses because they think that it creates oxygen in the body.
Oh.
And the only thing that creates oxygen is plants and, well, a factory which creates oxygen. But, and of course, there is a huge oxygen crisis in India right now because we've run short of oxygen. There are tens of thousands of people who are going to be dying because they're not being able to get oxygen. Hospitals have been turning people away because they have run out of oxygen. And it's heartbreaking to see this. And politicians have actually been stopping tankers of oxygen from entering cities before by just going up to them, decorating them, doing prayers in front of them while keeping them from getting to the hospitals where they need to go.
It's really tough to hear all this, and maybe folks listening around the world, you too have seen the images on your nightly news report of the deeply, deeply distressing pictures and images coming out of India of people turning up at hospitals and being turned away, and it's an awful situation. Ah, dearie me. Sorry to contact you on such a heavy story, but it does tie in with there's a lot of bad thinking going on with people. I guess, in a way we can have to be very understanding because there are a lot of people in a very bad situation. They're going to be desperate, aren't they, for anything they think that could help.
Absolutely. That's why things like oxygen tanks, things like oxygen concentrators, ventilators have all gone into the black market, and people are buying them for tens of thousands of rupees more than they are valued at. So people are scared, people are desperate, people are huffing on things that they see on WhatsApp, including there was another message that was making its rounds in my family groups where they have been, of course, promoting the whole alkaline and acid diets, where they have actually said that an avocado has a pH of 15.6 and watercress has a pH of 22.7, and which is as far as last time I checked, the pH scale was only till 14. So,
oh boy,
it is. And because they're saying that the pH of the coronavirus ranges from 5.5 to 8.5, that's a magical virus. And to eliminate the virus, you need to eat more alkaline foods. And of course, there's a lot of inhalation and stuff like that. And that is just going everywhere. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. These are the things that I've come across. And I've become such a pain in the ass of most of my friends and family who send these things that they don't send it to me anymore. They just, so I'm left in the dark because I'm like, don't share this stuff. It's horrible. Yeah. But, so I've become a bit of an outcast in that factor. So I've asked my father, I was like, whoever sends you stuff, just send it straight to me.
All right.
That way I have a little bit of a little bit of a resource.
Well, yeah, it's a tough situation all round, and again, we can have sympathy and understanding for a lot of people who don't know. They simply think that this might work, or they've been told that this might work, and they're just desperate. So, yeah, not a good situation. Anyway, Abhijit, where can people find out more about what you do and your podcast?
Well, I am. You can find me on berationable.com. My podcast is called The Rationable Podcast. Unfortunately, things have been a little slow because I've been kind of bogged down with work, but you can definitely go with, there's a lot of good information still up there, and I'm going to be publishing a few fresh podcast episodes over the next couple of weeks, and with a lot of good information. Especially, there's a doctor I interviewed recently called Dr. Hariyaksh Pathak, who has talked extensively about the vaccines, the COVID-19 vaccines, especially the ones available in India. Because there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy going on still. So just to kind of clear the air, understand which one's which, what they do, how they'll help you, and kind of does away with all the fears of side effects, etc. So that one is coming up in just a couple of days.
All right.
But yeah, please subscribe to the podcast. I'd love to have you there and send me whatever feedback you might have.
Okay, Abhijit, once again, thank you very much, and we'll chat again before long with maybe towards the end of May or June or something like that, and we can have a better understanding about this terrible second or third wave that's happening in India.
This is the second wave, and it's a bad one. We've already gone way past what the worst last year had to throw at us. But hopefully we'll be over the hump by the end of next month. So yeah, we'll catch up then.
Okay. Well, stay safe. And once again, Abhijit, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon. Hi there, I'm Abhijit, and I host the Rationable podcast on berationable.com. Every couple of weeks, I science the hell out of alternative medicines, health and nutrition fads, social media forwards, science news, and lots more. Of course, you can find all of my articles, podcast episodes, and lots more on www.berationable.com. See you there, and until then, always be rationable.
Now let's go once again into the pages at Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, the online resource from the Australian Government and the National Library of Australia. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of digitised articles, newspapers, journals, periodicals, notebooks, magazines, and so on, going back decades and decades and decades. Now, we've looked into hauntings before, haunted houses, some months ago, but today I thought we'd look into a specific example of a haunting, in this case, poltergeist. Now, the general translation into English is playful ghost. It could be racketing or a ghost making a racket or something like that. And upon researching poltergeist in these pages, I discover that the term has been around for longer than I thought. In fact, our first port of call, the first item coming up, comes from Queensland Times, dated the 16th of April 1927. Exposed poltergeist girl. The Romanian poltergeist, unruly ghost, girl, Eleanor Zugan, who recently gave a display of her supposed remarkable powers in London, has, it is asserted, been unmasked by a Munich doctor and a conjurer acting in collaboration. The girl, it may be recalled, claimed to be possessed by the devil, who, it was stated, was responsible for the marks of bites, scratches, welts, etc., which appeared on the girl's skin, apparently through no human agency. Dr. Hans Rosenbusch and the conjurer, Herr Otto Diehl, a German amateur masculine, and incidentally that is like a stage magician, of unusual powers and observation, has, however, published a document proving without a shadow of a doubt that the Polish Countess Zoe Wazilko, in whose company the girl travelled was the main agent of the deception. Conspirators. The pair were in Munich, where a film is being made of Eleanor's strange markings, and the film operator adds as evidence that in the pauses the Countess, under the pretense of smoothing the girl's hair, would skillfully scratch her cheek or neck. Eleanor is one of those curious human beings whose skin reacts abnormally on an average 2 to 3 minutes after being pinched, scratched, or even poked. According to the document mentioned, while the girl was displaying one mark, either she or the Countess would adroitly manage to injure the skin and so produce the next. Often a handkerchief or a hand held before the mouth to conceal a yawn was used as a cloak. Often a flutter of the Countess's eyelids would give directions. So cleverly was this done that no complete evidence was forthcoming till Dr. Rosenbusch could get both to his own house at a tea party on the ostensible grounds of discussing the film, in the success of which the Countess was financially interested. At a sitting after tea, which continued for 5 hours, notes were taken by Herr Dill, masquerading as a harmless inquirer, of the most insignificant moments of the girl and the Countess. The absolute coincidence of touch and the resultant mark proves that there is no devil in the case, but only very clever sleight of hand. The pair have now vanished from Munich. Eleanor Zuggin came to London at the beginning of October last and was examined on many occasions in connection with her supposed abnormal powers. Mr. Harry Price, Honorary Director of the National Laboratory of Psychical Research, in a report on the girl, wrote, "There is not the slightest doubt that our careful experiments made under ideal scientific conditions have proved that the stigmatic markings appear spontaneously on various parts of Eleanor's body, that she was not consciously responsible for the production of the marks, and under test conditions, movement of physical objects without contact took place." Well, there we are. History repeats itself decades later with the likes of James Randi and so forth, and it reminds me of the occasion when I had a word to, as I've mentioned him before, the late Simon Turnbull, who was the president of the Australian Psychics Association. I was on a TV chat show with him once, and during the course of the TV chat show, Skeptics versus Believers or whatever, he was waxing lyrical about Uri Geller and the fact that he was right up close to Uri Geller and Uri Geller bent a spoon and there's no way he could have done that. Whereupon I bent a spoon on the TV show, and I could see poor old Simon Turnbull's, the gears in his brain seize up a little bit. After the show, I took him aside and I told him point blank that he should know how the trick is done. He, of all people, should know how the trick is done. I showed him the trick, and he looked at me and said, "When you do it, it's a trick, but when Uri Geller did it, it was real." What more could I have done? And our next item comes to us from Truth magazine, published on the 12th of June 1949, and this is in Sydney. Unpopular poltergeist, with the accompanying photograph of a man sort of squatting down bent over with a large plank in his hand as if he's about to hit something. A Mortdale poltergeist has terrified Mr. Norman Green of Villagers Street, Mortdale, and the rest of his family by its rappings and knockings all over the premises since Friday night. Investigations have failed to show the cause of the noises, which have been heard by neighbours living some distance away. The greenhouse is the only one in the street affected. Here, Mr. Green's brother-in-law, Mr. Alf Berryman of Homer Street, Earlwood, was snapped by Truth last night as he peered under the Mortdale house. Armed with a paling, Mr. Berryman promises the ghost a warm reception. I know Homer Street, old wood. It's not terribly far from where I am now. And now from the Herald, published in Melbourne, Victoria, Monday the 17th of July, 1950. Poltergeist drives family from flat. Herald Special Service. London, Sunday. The Sargent family, husband Victor, wife Betty and baby Christopher, is living in one small room with scarcely enough space to move between beds because a vindictive poltergeist has driven them from their modern, self-contained flat at Epsom. Mr. Sargent said, "I did not believe in that sort of thing before, but I admit I was scared to death during the last few days in the flat." Mrs. Sargent explained, "Something happened on most nights. The poltergeist seemed to be most active and vindictive between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. It was active during the day too, but not dangerous. One night I felt something trying to strangle me. We went out of the bedroom into the lounge to get away from it and tried to sleep on the couch. In a few minutes it tried to choke me again. As we went downstairs to tell people in the flat below, it gave me a push in the back. Another night I was in bed when a lamp on a small table beside me came across and hit me in the head." Mr. Sargent said, "The lamp rose from the table, struck my wife, passed over her bed and landed on mine. I was thoroughly shaken. One night Betty was sitting up in bed while something began pulling at her shoulders. It dragged her towards the window. It lifted her body so that only her legs and thighs were touching the bed. She cried for help and I grabbed her legs, but whatever it was had great strength. At first I could not held Betty. I felt something going towards the window too. Then quite suddenly it seemed to lose its power and Betty fell." Now we come to 1926, Western Mail from Perth, Western Australia, Thursday the 18th of November, and a story relating to the poltergeist girl we read before. This is interesting. It says, "Money flies. Poltergeist girl mystery. Coins flew about the seance room in a disconcerting way recently when a sitting was held at the National Laboratory of Psychical Research, South Kensington, England, where Eleanor Zagan, the Romanian poltergeist girl, reports the London Daily News. Both her hands were held, and the 60-watt red light made observations of any movement by her or any of the sitters quite easy. Marked coins which had been placed in various parts of the room flew about without any apparent cause. One coin, which had been placed on a shelf some yards from anyone in the room, suddenly flew across to the gramophone. "There was no possibility," said Mr. Harry Price, Honorary Director of the laboratory, "of anyone in the room having touched the coin." I think a little bit of talcum powder here and there would have been of great use to the investigators at the time. And now we come to the year 1953, on Friday the 15th of May, published in the Blackwood Times, which is was a newspaper from Western Australia. What is a poltergeist? What exactly is a poltergeist? This question will be on a number of lips in the district in the next few weeks, and although the subject is a very intangible one, a few words about these troublesome oddities should make for keener appreciation of the play to be presented by Bridgetown Repertory Club. The name is of German derivation and means literally noisy ghost, from polter, which is perhaps best described in English as shindy or din, and geist. And the appellation fits perfectly the most conspicuous trait of the poltergeist, being its ability to create unexpected noises. There are numerous and well-supported stories about poltergeists, and fresh occurrences are reported at frequent intervals throughout the world. Skeptics will smile condescendingly. But it is much easier to treat such apparitions with contempt and amusement from the distance of time and space, and one only has to contemplate a possible visitation to gain some idea of the grotesque and amusing situations which could be caused in a quiet English vicarage when unwillingly entertaining one of these phenomena. Such is the theme of the play, which Bridgetown Repertory Club has entered for the annual festival in competition with other clubs throughout the state, and officials of the club are hoping that the production will do even better than in the Jubilee year, when Bridgetown's Saloon Bar, which was placed third among the country entries, the first and second being eventually winner and runner-up for the state. And we end with something from the year 1949, Saturday the 12th of February, Sydney Morning Herald. Beware of the Poltergeist. By Hugh Lemming. The milking machine mystery at Tarcutta has yet to be solved. Possibly that the cause of the alarming flight of the machine's plates, which baffled farmers and engineers, was of poltergeist origin, deserves wider investigation. For poltergeist activity is not to be dismissed with incredulous laughter or ironical references to gremlins. It will be recalled that heavy metal plates were cast off the milking machine by an unknown force and at terrific velocity. The machine was examined by engineers who could offer no explanation. Meanwhile, the power of poltergeists is being investigated by the Psychical Research Society in connection with similar inexplicable happenings in Britain. Poltergeist is a German word, translating literally into bracketing spirits. The Encyclopedia Britannica states that poltergeist phenomenon have been noted for hundreds of years, notably in the hauntings recorded by the great evangelist John Wesley in his house at Epsworth in 1770. Dr. Harry Price, investigator of the strange phenomenon for the Psychical Research Society, probes the poltergeist problem in his book, The End of Borley Rectory, published last year. He records from his own observations that the haunted Borley Rectory, and from records scrupulously kept by other skeptical observers, that at least 2,000 poltergeist phenomena were experienced in the rectory between October 1930 and October 1935. Phenomenon included permeation of the rectory by the odour of lavender, when no lavender was used or growing in the vicinity, and by the smell of cooking when no one was cooking in the house. Cotton reels placed on shelves flew in the rooms. Brass candlesticks jumped from tables to chairs. Kitchen utensils dropped from their shelves. Stones appeared under pillows. House bells, not electrically operated, rang madly. Doors, heavily bolted and barred, swung open with a crash that shook the windows. Plates smashed to bits on the floor, and a few seconds later were found undamaged again in the cupboards. All this happened without human agency. These phenomena, for which scientists have so far failed to find an explanation, were carefully observed by many investigators who laid a variety of traps to catch the things responsible if they should prove to be prompted by human mischievousness or malice. Cotton threads were strung across the rooms, heavy seals placed on doors, automatic cameras hidden in cupboards, and thermometers secreted about the rectory to register the sudden drops in temperature which usually accompany poltergeist manifestations. The threads were unbroken, the seals untouched. The floor again became littered with kitchen utensils flung apparently through locked and sealed doors by some invisible agency. The thermometers revealed fantastic drops in temperature at these times, and the cameras revealed house bricks and candlesticks apparently hovering in mid-air. In summing up the evidence of the Borley Rectory poltergeist activity, Sir Ernest Jelf, Senior Master of the Supreme Court, wrote in the London Law Times in August 1941, "These occurrences stand on a different level from the ordinary ghost story, insomuch as the poltergeist is a hypothesis to account for a force which can produce actual physical and chemical changes in matter. A very strong case has been put forward by reputable witnesses, and we are at a loss to understand what cross-examination could shake it." As Boswell said to Dr. Johnson, "All reason is against it, all experience is for it." Similar poltergeist manifestations have been reported from many places in Britain and other countries. Notable cases were those of the leper bell at Warren House, Thetford, and at Ciderstone Hall in Berkshire. At Warren Hall, an old leper bell, a handbell carried by lepers in the Middle Ages, would ring at intervals. It had been seen detaching itself from the wall hook without human aid, then moving through the air to a table, ringing violently en route, as if being shaken by the hand no one could see. At Searstone Hall, the phenomena which occurred at Borley Rectory was repeated with some curious additions. Kitchen utensils were flung about the rooms, a water pump handle moved up and down, and the rusted wheels of a mill began to turn without power. At St. Pau, a small town in northern France, which many diggers of the first AIF may recall, there was a well-authenticated case of poltergeist activity reported 2 years ago. In this instance, a massive flywheel of a steam engine plough began to revolve at enormous speed where there was no operative power. It was seen by dozens of persons, including the local Grenadier. It was repeated thrice. On the last occasion, the wheel tore itself from the strong shaft and flew 300 metres into the side of a barn. Police have yet to arrest a poltergeist for causing a public nuisance. When I was a reporter on an English journal 20 years ago, I and other newspaper men witnessed uncanny poltergeist phenomenon in the Kentish village of Marden, where laundry, irons, kettles, stirrups, cutlery, and copper coins moved from the shelves and tables whenever an adolescent boy entered the kitchen of the farmhouse. The boy could offer no explanation for attracting metal, though he could pick up pins using his fingers as a magnet. I saw a heavy ironside of a table move horizontally in the air and crash at the feet of the boy. The manifestations weakened in a few hours, as if the strange power was slowly ebbing. 2 scientists investigating the incidents were unable to offer any solution. They pondered 2 conflicting theories. One suggested that the boy's body contained a greater element of animal magnetism than is possessed by a normal person, and that this power became operative under certain climactic conditions. The Marden events occurred at a time of recurrent thunderstorms. A second suggestion was that normal elemental electricity from the air was by some means being used by the boy as an earth wire, transforming the human body into a powerful magnet. It was also suggested that the boy was possessed by a devil. There was a case before the English courts recently in which a tenant applied for reduction in the rent of a house in which it was alleged poltergeists were at war with phantoms. Unhappily, the tribunal was unable to call ghosts or geists as witnesses, so the cases proceeded on other grounds. Most poltergeist phenomena is associated with the presence of a human being, usually a young girl or boy, often a cripple or in some other way abnormal physically or mentally. Telekinesis, the moving of inanimate objects by invisible means, is linked with poltergeist activity. It seems established from the evidence available that some force, psychic or as yet unexplained scientifically, at times intrudes upon the mundane world. After all, radio and radar 100 years ago would have been as black a magic as poltergeist phenomena still is today. Wow, what interesting accounts of things flying around rooms and so on, way back from 1949. Always interesting to tiptoe through the pages of Trove. In this case, we were looking, the last one was the Sydney Morning Herald, which is still in publication, of course. And you too can enjoy a couple of hours looking through the pages of Trove at trove.nla.gov.au. And like me, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. On next week's show in the Trove Archive, we're going to be doing a bit of a variation. In fact, we'll be looking at newspapers overseas from the United States, talking about skeptics marking the homework of psychics when it comes to predictions. And this is something I've been doing with my team for a while now. Well, I looked around the archives around the world and I discovered that various other skeptical groups, namely the Bay Area skeptics, were doing something like this a couple of decades ago. So we're going to be looking at that. Also, we have another report with our new reporter Adrian Hill from Canada, another report about numbers. Thank you to those people who subscribe at skepticzone.tv via Patreon or PayPal. And if you enjoy the show each week, if you get something out of it, entertainment at least, education, maybe a few laughs along the way, then please consider being a Patreon. And you can do that for as little as very little each month, $1 I think, or $5, hardly anything at all. But it all adds up, and it all means the Skeptic Zone can keep going. Visit skepticzone.tv, scroll to the bottom of the page, and you can also check out my origami digital downloads, Photography of Origami. And if you buy one of those, that money also goes to help the Skeptic Zone. And just before I go, a big happy birthday to Jim Wilshire, the voiceover man for the Skeptic Zone. Right at the beginning of the episode, you hear his voice welcoming you to the show before you hear me. Big happy birthday to my dear friend Jim. I hope I can visit you, well, sometime this year. And a happy birthday to our friend Lara Benham, who is on the committee of the Skeptics and who you hear on the show from time to time. Happy birthday to you both. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.